So the subject of the Dharma talk this morning is impermanence. Impermanence is what the Buddha described as one of the three marks or characteristics of existence. He called it, in the ancient language of Pali, he called it anicca, impermanence. The other two marks of existence are dukkha, or suffering, and anatta, or selflessness. Now, the Buddha was really firm and very, very specific that all phenomena are undergoing change from moment to moment. Arising, passing away, coming and going, living and dying. Even this human body, which we tend to see as a substantial thing, is constantly changing. We shed skin cells, we grow fingernails, we grow hair, our hair falls out, our hair turns gray. When we're young, we grow and become stronger, larger. When we're old, the body begins to deteriorate. We become weaker. So we have an experience of impermanence right here in our own body. And it's also our experience of everything. In the Dhammapada, which is a collection of Buddha's scriptures in verse form, the Buddha says in Pali, Sabbe sankhara anicchati yada panyaya pasati atta nibbānam dukkhe asamago visuddhya. And in English, that means all things are impermanent. When one observes this with insight, then one becomes detached from suffering. This is the path to purification. Now, just before he died, the Buddha was attended by his disciples who were waiting breathlessly as he slipped nearer and nearer to death, and they wanted one last teaching from the Buddha. So he had one more chance to offer something to them and to the world. These were his very last words that he chose, his last message. And he said, all compounded things are impermanent. All things conditioned are subject to change. The Buddha really wanted us to understand and to grasp this truth, this concept that all things are impermanent. And those last words that he spoke are very commonly recited at funerals in Buddhist countries to just basically remind us of the impermanence of the human body and human life, of all life. Another Buddhist tradition is offering fresh flowers whenever we pay respect to a Buddha image, either on an altar in our home or in a temple somewhere. And we offer the flowers, of course, as an offering of beauty and respect to the Buddha, but also to symbolize impermanence, this fundamental teaching of impermanence. Because these beautiful flowers that are so lovely and fragrant, when we offer them, the next day or the day after that might be just withered and dead. Now, one of the reasons that I'm sitting here in the woods this morning, this kind of chilly morning, is that when I think of nature, when I think of impermanence, I think of nature. Nature provides us with a wonderful example of impermanence. It's a great teacher of that concept. And I appreciate how much nature has to teach us. And it really teaches us how to accept impermanence with grace in the way that nature accepts the changes. You know, in spring, there are some beautiful mountain coves near here in the Blue Ridge foothills, and there are tiny wildflowers that bloom at a certain time in the very early spring, late winter, early spring. And those wildflowers are called, by botanists, they're called spring ephemerals. Such a lovely phrase, spring ephemerals. And they really are ephemeral. They appear very suddenly, seemingly very suddenly. They're only with us a short time, And then as more sunlight reaches the forest floor, they cannot handle the sunlight, so they die out. So they come very quickly and they leave very quickly, ephemeral. We just get to enjoy them for a short while. So, you know, it's the same with trees. These trees around me, maybe 6 weeks ago, were completely bare, and I could look up through the bare branches and just see the sky very clearly above me. And then the little leaf tips, the little buds of the leaves came out on the ends of the branches, very small and colorful. And now, look, fully leafed out, beautiful, you know, reflecting the sunlight, moving in the wind. And maybe 6 months from now, 5 or 6 months from now, these leaves will fall, of course. They will turn colors and fall and become mulch for next year's growth, just as last year's leaves have become mulch now for this year's growth. So there's that cyclical movement of change and arising and passing away that we can see in nature. Of course, the Buddha was not the only brilliant mind who had something to say about impermanence. There was also the Greek philosopher Heraclitus, who said, "There is no static being. Change and movement is the Lord of the universe. Everything is in a state of becoming, of continual flux." And that's actually part of a more famous quote, which you might have heard of. The more commonly quoted part of this teaching from Heraclitus is, "No one ever steps in the same river twice." That's an amazing way to put it and to express it, isn't it? No one ever steps in the same river twice. Because that river will never again be as it was in that exact moment when you dipped your toe in it. It's always moving, always flowing, impermanent. I'd like to share another quote. This one is from a female Tibetan Lama named Pema Khandro Rinpoche. I love this quote. She has something positive to say about impermanence. She says, "Impermanence is not just an illuminator of loss, it's also an illuminator of newness. It's an illuminator of the ever unfolding present moment and its creativity." That's more positive, right? Impermanence is not only about loss and sadness. It's not all negative. It's not only about things and people we love passing away. It's not only about us losing what we cherish in this life. It's also about the present moment and how everything is new and fresh in each moment. It's that river that's never exactly the same. It's always a new river. So if we're not so focused on the loss part of impermanence, we can discover the freshness of the very next moment, always presenting itself to our awareness, if we're paying attention. So impermanence is really a teacher for us. And here's where I think this teaching might be useful to us right now in the middle of this pandemic that we are weathering and experiencing and living through. Because impermanence teaches us to let go of what we're trying so desperately to hold on to. Whether it's our youth or our loved ones or our life as we know it, or even things as they used to be before COVID-19, life as we knew it before. Impermanence teaches us that if we let go, we can fully and deeply and completely experience the richness and freshness of the present moment. We can fully live in the here and now. So to close, I want to share some lines with you from poet Mary Oliver, the poet laureate of awareness and mindfulness and nature, of course. You probably know this poem if you're a Mary Oliver fan. It's called In Blackwater Woods. And in this poem, Mary Oliver talks about impermanence. She doesn't use the word impermanence, but it's definitely here. So I'm just going to read the last couple stanzas. This is the way that the poem ends in Blackwater Woods. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing that your own life depends on it, and when the time comes, to let it go, to let it go. So if we really think about it, impermanence is actually a gift. It's a blessing. It helps us really pay attention to how precious everything that we experience is. The taste of the air around us, the colors of nature, the face of a loved one, the sound of a bird, just the sweetness of this moment. Everything we encounter and experience as we move through our lives. All of it will change, yes, inevitably. And we cannot stop that ceaseless flow of change. We must yield. But if everything is impermanent, everything is precious.